Hey, what's up, everyone? My name's Trent Russell. I'm the tech sales instructor at CourseCareers. Today, we are highlighting Shu and his story breaking into tech, making the big bucks, living in New York City. Shu, why don't you share with everyone what you were doing before you got into tech, before you got exposed to CourseCareers, and what really led to that pivot of you wanting to get into tech sales?
Yes. So originally, I started working in the restaurant industry for over 8 years, 9 years now. So I'm currently actually 27 at the moment. So I've been doing it since I was 19. So the reason why I want to transition into tech sales, when I was working inside the restaurant industry, I knew that I love working with the POS and those kind of technology functions. I realized that, okay, I want to do something like that, but at the same time, what are some of the skills that I can transfer over into making that transition into tech? And then I thought to myself, there was different options to look into. And then last summer, I started looking into different things I can do. And I figured out and found out that, hey, tech sales was something that I can probably do because I already knew that I was already motivated, energetic, and also a people person in general. Because working in the customer service space, I know a lot of people think this, like, oh, like I can talk, I can do stuff, I can, communicate with people. There's people out there who really want to just try and do something. And then I realized, like, I'm not going to be an IT guy, or I'm not going to be a software engineer. That's going to be something down the line. But then I realized tech sales is something that I can really accumulate towards because I've been actually hitting my quota in my previous jobs too. And that's something that I could relate over, which transitioned pretty well when I was doing those interviews as well too. And then so yeah, that's where I started looking into boot camps. And then I figured, CourseCareers is the most affordable option for me. And I realized that, like, I'd rather put in the work and see where I can go, down the line. It took me a little bit longer than for some people, but for me, I felt like the grind was really worth it for me, and the whole experience there was what I wanted for sure. Yeah.
When you talk about the grind being worth it, is that because you eventually landed at your dream company, or you now feel like, well, hey, I get bigger pay, more flexibility? What was it about that payoff that made all that hard work worth it?
Um, Generally speaking, I think it was the whole step-by-step experience too. It's not gonna be like the dream company that I wanted to work, but at the same time, it's something that I really wanted to work. It's a company that I really wanted to work. They really appreciate my ethics and how I am as a human being, and that part really made me feel like, okay, this is the company I wanted to work for. Like, as much as these interviews, I feel like a lot of people feel pressured through it. Of course, like at some point you should be, but you also have to understand, like, at the end of the day, what are the company needs? What do they want? What kind of people are they looking for? And when you start doing your research and when you start actually going into those practices, doing those interviews, and you have multiple experiences doing those interviews, you start realizing that, okay, like, I think I know what to break down, because a lot of these tech, a lot of companies that are actually looking for sales development roles or even business development roles, the requirements are pretty much the same, but it's more like, as a person or who you are, how confident are you and how well can you speak into it when you're actually doing these interviews. It's not really about the requirements of the job too. So I think that was a big focus point for me. The little by little experiences that came along the way.
How much did you know about tech and the role of being an SDR, BDR before going through the course?
Zero. Completely zero. Yeah, I had zero experience, Trent. Zero.
And after completing the course, how did it prepare you for your new job to land the role, but also after starting?
Yes. So one thing that really got me focused is, I think it was the basic training and knowing the knowledge of, if you were to go into the role, like, what are the things that you should know in advance to do it. A lot of times, I think right after when people graduate CourseCareers, the first thing they have in their mind is like, okay, how do I apply for these jobs? How do I do it? And you start, wondering and guessing and stuff, but in reality, it's making those connections and getting to talk with those people. So, um, one of the things that I did right after the course too is, like, I did something that's a little bit off the course, but something a little bit more creative, because one thing in the course careers they mention is getting creative with how you make your approach or your outreach. What I did was, for one company, I actually outreached to a VP, and then luckily I was able to get onto a call with them. So I think, like, stuff like that, like where people don't expect it, or things that people don't do, is something that really gets people, like, thinking like, oh, okay, this person wants to try to do something here. And luckily I was able to land an interview for that. So it was a great experience too. But I think there's generally speaking, like there's a lot of strategic approaches, but course careers generally just gives you an idea, like, how to prepare, like all those basic criteria and stuff like that. But yeah, like it's pretty much a big plus for you if you don't have any experience, you really want to do something, but at the same time, like, you just need to know and understand like what it takes for you to get into the sales development or business development role too.
Tell me more about this creative approach, reaching out to the VP to eventually meet with them or get introduced to someone on their team. How did that work?
Yeah, so what I did was basically I did use Apollo. That was one of the free tools that I had. So I used Apollo to look up their numbers. Along with that, I did look through the company website and like what kind of like I was looking at some of like their information and data and stuff like that, and like what kind of things. Along with that, I knew they were hiring people at the moment. So instead of just trying to apply for a job normally to like posting your resume, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff, I just directly contacted the VP of sales, and then he was like, "Oh, okay, like, why is this person calling me out of the blue?" And that was actually one of my very first cold calls that, in terms of my sales experience, tech sales experience doing it. And he was like, "Oh, what do you want?" I'm like, "Oh, recently saw you hiring," and then we just had more of the casual conversation. And then moving and leading into that, I was looking into his LinkedIn profile already, so I did a little bit of my research ahead of time, and I already knew what kind of interests he has. So I just try to make it more into a casual conversation, and that led ultimately for me to actually land an interview. So it was a great experience.
So what you're saying is you identified a company you wanted to work for. You did your research by seeing that they were hiring. You identified this VP of sales. You found his number, and then you cold called him directly to then get an interview.
Correct. Yeah.
That's incredible. I think a lot of people can learn from that because there's the front door where you just apply to companies, and then there's a back door which requires creativity. To your point, so
Mm.
that's a great example, Shu. I hope everyone can make a note of that and learn from that and start applying that today. How long did it take you from the time you completed the course to then landing the job? Can you just talk about that? I know you mentioned the step by step
Mm.
process. Just what did timelines look like? Because I think that's important to talk about.
Yes. So for me, I think I took a little bit longer than the people or alumni I talked to and the people that I actually connected throughout the course when I started taking the course too. But I finished the course in December, at the end of December. So I started my job hunt around January, and then I finally started or transitioned into the role in April. So one of the things that I learned is I've been doing like three different strategies when I was going into these interviews and stuff. And for my first strategy, I was honestly just trying out things at the moment because I wasn't in a rush to try to land a job versus like I wanted to land in a job where I know that I can feel or I can go into a role where I can, truly succeed. So yeah, so first approach that I had was me going into just applying to jobs normally. So like you go through the website and then just click on it and then just apply, put in your resume. That didn't work out. I've been doing it for like 2 to 3 weeks. And the first January, that didn't work out at all. So then I changed my second approach, which was okay, like why don't I send a direct message or email to them? And that's all I did for another month. The response rate was less than 1%. So out of like 100% that engaged into. So that didn't work out. And the third one that really worked out for me, this one was really simple but really creative for me. I generally just started to think like if I really wanted to get in front of the door and talk to these people, like just talk to them on LinkedIn. Like that's what I thought. And then what I did is I started making a more of a creative approach to my LinkedIn Connect request, and I was able to get a response rate over 60% from these. Let's just say from out of 100% that I've been doing, a 60% respond rate, and that led me ultimately to generally making more interviews. And I've been actually, so when I say about interviews, landing those interviews and actually getting the job, it was actually like I was actually only making like one or two interviews in the first 2 months. And then all of a sudden, going into March, I was landing more than 15 interviews in 1 or 2 weeks. So, I think it's just like it's your creativity too, but also like if you were the other person on the other side, how do you want to get your message across? Like, what are you capable of? What did you learn from Course Careers? And what other experiences in your background from your previous experiences that you can generally transition over. And if you can highlight those and identify those, people will be hooked onto it for sure.
What was the most challenging part of this interview application process? It sounds like it was really slow the first few months, and then you
Mm.
tweaked your LinkedIn strategy of perhaps a connection request message, personalizing it, whatever it may be. What was overall, as you look back, the most challenging part about landing the job?
I think a lot of people will feel this, and I like to be honest as much as possible. But I think it was a rejection. And then, like what's interesting about this is when you're actually applying to these jobs, it's so interesting. It's like you're already doing the job, like, as a BDR or sales development role. So I kind of took it as that approach where it's more like a challenge. And yeah, so the rejection was the biggest part, but I think it's how you overcome it and how you keep yourself mentally prepared for the next one. Because I realized that, in this space where tech sales is getting more and more popular and it's becoming more of a thing where most people want to go into the role, you have to, realize and like identify yourself as like, okay, how am I going to be different from the other people that are trying to go into this space? That's what the biggest key challenge for me was.
Do you think you would have been able to navigate this process and eventually land the job in tech without course careers?
Definitely no. 100%. The reason why I say this is because I didn't have prior experience. And like I mentioned earlier, so I was working as a general manager and a business manager for my previous work experiences. Maybe if I did research online, I could have maybe somehow did something. But generally speaking, having course careers is a huge advantage for you because that gives you an ultimate leverage during the interview process. And they'll ask you questions like, oh, so how did course careers help you prepare? Like, oh, what did you do there? Like those kind of questions would definitely pop out. It 100% popped out for me in those interviews. And then you can explain your point on what kind of things you did at course careers and how did that ultimately lead you to actually landing into those interviews too. That is already your experience and that is something that you should leverage. A lot of times people think that you can't use that as your experience, but I definitely disagree. You can use that to your advantage, and please use that to your advantage if you do happen to take the course.
Now that you're in a high paying career path in the place you want to be, how do you envision your life changing over the next few years?
That's a great question. So when I actually was going through these interviews, and actually before I even landed a job, I had no clue of what how far I wanted to get into. But now that I speak into it, so currently I'm working as a business development rep. So one thing I've noticed that our company is more of a strategic approach where we try to, get an idea of how the prospects can do stuff and how we identify them and how we, get creative with our approach and stuff like that. But down the line, I think I really want it to be more of a sales manager role where I can actually help other people that are just transitioning into the role and help them truly succeed in their roles. I don't think I want to stay as a rep, of course, in the long run, but for me, I think account executive will be my next step. And then another path that I definitely look into, let's just say 3 to 5 years down the line, I definitely want to be someone who's, more of a mentorship. So like someone who's more into like a customer management success. Those kind of like roles are another things that I definitely do look into.
That's fantastic, Shu. How long have you been working in the new role, and how does it compare to what you were doing previously?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? Sorry, you kind of blurred out.
How long have you been working in the new role, and how does it compare to what you were doing previously?
Yes. So currently in my role right now as a business development rep, I've been actually been in the role for 1 month now. So actually hitting in May will be my first month. And then my other roles, what I've been doing, and let's just say the difference between it, um, it was more of like for me, it was more like a hard labor job. So of course there are numbers
Hmm.
games where I have to still play with, but also I do have to take care of the operation as well too. So I did a little bit of everything because my previous company was more of a startup, but generally speaking, this new role for me has been totally completely different. It's more of, like what you're doing, but and then it's the same thing every day. But then again, it's a lot of cold calling, cold emailings, and getting strategically approaching with that. Cold calling is definitely one of the things I really wanted to highlight and talk about too. I think it's people. Some people say cold calling is dead. Honestly, I disagree. It's never gonna go away. Like Trent, this the best. Like I've been watching your videos. Everyone's out there watching your videos too. But cold calling will definitely not disappear, and it's something that is new for me because it's really interesting. Like my previous work experience, I've actually had a lot of sales development reps cold calling me at my restaurant, and I was like, they are always cautious about what to say on the phone versus like,
Yeah, yeah.
like it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. That's all it takes, like, and then how you can develop that into their needs, right? So it's like, I know it sounds easy when you say it, it sounds easy, and it's not though, but this is something that I want to master down the line. I think that was the biggest challenge for me. But of course, like, I'm still working at my home right now, and it's still tiring. It is the grind, and you have to hustle every single day. But mentally, for me, I feel much more in a better place right now because I know that I'm doing something that I love to do or want to challenge myself into versus a restaurant job. I knew that I hit my peak performance. Besides me being like an ownership or having my own restaurant in general, I knew that I wouldn't be going anywhere.
Well, you sound like an expert, Shu, just saying that simple. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So it sounds like you know what you're talking about. So I think you'll be good to go there. What advice would you have for someone who's looking to change their life getting in tech sales, but that's still hesitant or on the fence about starting with course careers?
That's a great question. I've actually had that. So talking about my experience too, again, last summer in August is when I started actually doing my research. That was the most time when people actually start doing their research and they're getting interested in it. I think the moment that you're interested in it is when people a lot of times start doing more research than they should be or expected to do. And one thing that you should understand, and I've probably mentioned this to other students as well too, is are you like, it's not a cakewalk. That's one thing for sure. Like you're doing the same thing consistently and constantly every single day. And then as a sales development rep or even a business development rep, you have to be really, really, really persistent and you have to be patient with what you're doing too, because at the end of the day, it's a grind still. And, like you're talking to people left and right, back and forth every single day. But even though you get to have the luxury of the high pay and you still you think about the good parts too, you also have to think about, is that something that you really want to do? Is that something you want to go into? Are you going to be a person that's going to be willing to put in the work and grind into it? And I definitely think a lot of people will say yes, but it's always great to do some research in advance. But also I think I realized, like, one of the things that I really got into course careers too was because of the intro video. So they put out an hour video to actually go through and talk about, like, is it something that you wanted to do? And it was interesting. I think a lot of people should just definitely watch that. And for me, like, that video itself was really creative. It's not like, like a really robotic video. It was something that was just really interesting. And then I thought to myself, I can do it. Like, you just have to trust yourself more than anybody. And I think that's where it all starts.
Well, Shu, I've got good news for you and the audience.
What is it?
The free intro course that you're referencing happens to be linked in the description below so that anyone who's interested
Wow.
could just click on it and learn more. Could you believe that?
Wow, you know what? I had to go research it myself and find those. You guys are all lucky right now. Oh my God. Please go watch it. It's definitely worth it. If you're interested in it, becoming a sales development rep or a business development rep, it's definitely worth it. Please go watch it on your own free time. Definitely worth
And
it.
Shu, the final question or statement here. I know that you successfully completed course careers. You got
Yes.
hired. You're starting to build your experience. You're newer in the role. You're going to start hitting the phones. You've decided to become a coach with course careers, and that's also a unique attribute with course careers is the community, the small groups, the networking, but also pairing students with coaches who have actually been there and done that, gone through the program, learned what they need to know, and get the job. Can you talk about why you decided to become a course careers coach and how you see the coaching platform being useful to students?
So the reason why I got into being a coach at Course Careers was because myself, obviously, I took the course itself and graduated and actually ultimately landed the role or job. So first of all, I couldn't become a coach obviously if I didn't land the role because it just doesn't make sense because I don't have the results to say that I landed. But definitely the reason why I wanted to do it was ultimately just because I think everyone can do it. Like for me, like, obviously I didn't come from any like tech sales background. I don't have any knowledge about tech prior before taking course careers, and that's what ultimately helped me when I actually was taking the course itself too, there's so many people inside the course, even our Discord channel, even with through LinkedIn as well too. Everyone, would talk to me, come approach me and be like, hey, you're new to this. Like, oh, it's like, and then when you ask questions, they always have the answer for you. But a lot of times I think people feel a little bit scared to kind of like approach, the course career students at first. So I wanted to create, or I wanted to do something for people where they can, see my profile and come up to me and say like, hey, Shu, like I got questions for you. Like, how do you do this and this and that? I wanted to, like, ultimately do something that you do. Like, I just want to be able to be one of those people that can, create a door for them and open, a gate for them where they have the more confidence, because I believe anyone really can do it with a little bit of persistence and hard work. And then ultimately going down the line, what I do want to experience with this whole coaching session is, I just want people to get the experience and understanding that, like, okay, like this is what I need to do, this is what I want to do, and if it's ultimately something that they want to actually go into and be doing it. And I just want people to succeed. That's all I really want out of this coaching sessions.
Fantastic, Shu. Well, I can see it right now. Someone watching this is going to decide to start Course Careers, and they're going to land their job, and they're eventually going to be a part of your student cohort, the coaching, and they're going to say, Shu, I listened to you on that interview. I started. Now I'm here today. So it's going to come full circle soon enough. But Shu, thanks so much for being here today. This was useful to me to hear, but also I'm sure for everyone still listening. For those of you who are listening, and if you are interested in getting into tech, make sure to check out the free intro course below.